and welcome to this first video about coaching and program management skills for the European Federation of Local Government Chief Executives, UDAIT. On this video and on the following, we will focus on deepening a really important tool in the world of coaching and which can be used well beyond the effective communication. Numerous studies have shown that the amount of information passing through our minds at any time is constantly filtered depending on, among other things, our beliefs, our values, and above all, the way we represent reality. Why do people react differently to the same events? Let's imagine a specific and unexpected fact within your workplace. Perhaps some of you start acting to make decisions immediately. Others may take some time to see what will happen with this unexpected event, or even some of you are those who come together with other partners to make a decision jointly and pooled in order to act. As you can see, combinations are endless and huge. What I want to be sure is that you begin to realize that everything we do and the way we behave is directly related to the way we process information and then act accordingly. What makes us to live the circumstances in so many different ways? We can use the argument as, well, I'm this way, I have this way of working, I have this view of life, and all that is fine, but we will be addressing only the tip of the iceberg. The key is to use patterns to filter the information that comes from outside. Some of these filters are directly responsible for directing our attention to certain things and ignoring others. Besides, they are ultimately responsible to determine our mental patterns, that is, the mechanism that causes us to act in a certain way in our workplace, even beyond, in our personal and professional activity, and how we communicate with others, or how we communicate that information coming from outside. In conclusion, our behavior will be guided by these patterns. We all use these filters called metamodels, and according to the environment in which we are, we have a natural tendency to use a filter or other, that is, one metamodel or another. Moreover, notice that knowing these patterns or mental models not only can greatly improve my communication with my partner or the person I am working with, but even go further and get those results that we want to achieve when we interact and synchronize with the pattern of my interlocutor. And most important, once you know your mental model and your mental patterns, you will be able to decide whether you want to start changing them or not. The aim is that all over these days you can practice with this tool, not only in your workplace, but far beyond. Try it with your colleagues, your family, or even with your superiors. I want to make an exception regarding what we'll see now. Metaprograms are not an option to decide if a person is one way or another. Perhaps it would be much wiser to speak of a tendency, that is, that a person has a tendency towards a more or less specific metamodel. Second, metamodels are not a form of labeling people. This would be a disappointing way of considering this tool. Understanding the metamodel is understanding that person's pattern and my capability to communicate with that person. And finally, there is no a right or wrong metamodel. All metamodels are used depending on the environment in which we find ourselves. Finding out what is the structure that defines my pattern or a person's pattern means going beyond communication, means knowing how that person is going to process that information and how we will communicate with me. Imagine two managers with the same technical skill level, using the same criteria for reporting or making decisions, and yet conclude their reports differently, even though both have the same amount and quality of information. Why is that? You may ask. Well, the difference lies mainly on which metaprograms are using each executive, which at the same time directly affects the decisions that are taken when preparing these reports, and finally, the results they are getting. Let's see the first case. It is the proactive-reactive pattern. The proactive pattern is characteristic of those with a tendency to make decisions immediately, to start acting. They are really good persons at finding solutions to complex issues, and they are what we colloquially call firefighters. In contrast, reactive people are much more likely to let the others take the initiative, or they will only take when they have clearly defined what they have to do. It is advisable to understand that one person can be both that proactive and reactive patterns in his own job or in his personal area or workplace. I'll give you an example. A manager can be really proactive in his work and instead be really reactive in his personal life. It is also very useful to watch a proactive or reactive person in terms of not only how he behaves, but also how his verbal and non-verbal language is. Proactive people tend to have faster movements, gesturing frequently and usually showing signs of impatience. They usually keep an upright posture, perhaps with the shoulders backwards, and, let's say, with the chest out. Instead, reactive people, however, have slower movements and are more attentive listening than to the actual initiative. In terms of direct verbal language, proactive people often use sentences like, "Come on now, let's start right now. Do not delay. Let's go for it. Let's take control." Instead, reactive people are very likely to use sentences like, "Take your time, evaluate the pros and the cons, double-check before making a decision." Notice that these words will help to detect or will give evidence of the kind of pattern this person is using. Let's suppose your supervisor or your mayor in the organization. He has a deep tendency to be reactive, while you, as directors, have a very proactive tendency. Can you imagine how the relationship with the mayor or your superior could be if you don't know his metamodel? Very likely, it will be a professional relationship where friction and conflicts arise every day, and still, we would not know why. The reason is probably, obviously, among other things, the metamodel we are using. So, if you have to present a report to your mayor or your superior, being his tendency to be reactive and yours proactive, it would be much more convenient to tune with his metamodel and use sentences like, "I had the opportunity to evaluate the pros and cons of this situation," or "I analyze with other municipalities what they are doing," or "Why not? I have analyzed all possible solutions to reach this conclusion." This way, when setting what his metamodel is, or tuning with it, you will significantly improve, almost automatically, your level of communication with your supervisor or with your mayor. By contrast, if you use sentences like, "We'll be the first to carry out this initiative," or "I'll have this supplementary report prepared in half an hour," you will be adding nothing more than stress to the communication, simply because you both are working with different metamodels. I propose you that along these days you practice directly with your staff. Practice directly in your work environment to analyze what results you produce, being able to connect directly to the other person's metamodel.